everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Middle East Wandering Teacher. So today we have Miss Shonna Young with us, and we're going to be talking about life as a teacher, her insights, experience, things that she's learned over the years. So first, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
First question, why did you get involved in teaching?
It was kind of a track to get there. I started pursuing a master's in education for school counseling. I kind of felt like people talked to me a lot, and so it was an easy fit for a counseling kind of degree. And then I really wanted to work with younger kids, so I went into education to keep that. And so I worked as a school counselor for 4.5 years and kind of found that I wanted to transition. So I started looking for jobs closer to my house. I found a job at an alternative school where I work now. And I started kind of as an aide and then worked into the teaching position where I've been, since then. And I've all throughout like high school and college, I worked in summer camps, substitute taught, and so it's kind of that natural progression. So it's not just that you know automatically what you want to do, but I knew I wanted to work with kids and kind of found that I enjoyed teaching in the classroom more so than I enjoyed like counseling students one-on-one or sitting in meetings for extended periods of time. So
Okay, yeah, very cool. So what is your background and experience in education? How long have you been teaching, and what do you teach?
I'll go back to the school counselor. So I worked as the school counselor for 4.5 years in an elementary. I worked pre-K through 5th grade between general ed and special ed population. So I worked in a public school, so we had all variety of students. The students that I worked with were more lower income. I would say 80% of those kids were on free and reduced lunch, so that's that lower income there. And then when I transitioned to where I'm at now, our school provides services for kindergarten through 12th grade. And I started in the 5th and 6th grade room with those kids, and then I've been moved into the high school. So I work majority with 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders. My students have emotional disabilities, so anything from autism to oppositional to some of them have Asperger's, which would fall into that autism. And so right now I work with about 6 students in person because of restrictions, and there's 2 other adults in the classroom, so we kind of bounce off of how to manage behaviors that we have, assist with behaviors, and then assist with the academics portion. But we teach the same curriculum that would be taught in a public high school. So English, algebra, our students get prepared for employment, post-graduation, and so those are the ones that I'm more teachers, but it varies from year to year. So I could be teaching, last year I taught 3 English classes, this year I teach 1 English class, and so
have to be ready for anything.
You have to be ready for anything, whatever they throw at you. So
yes. Well, that actually makes me think of several different questions. So first one, kind of reflecting on your time as a counselor, how do you feel like that has helped you as a teacher?
Which is interesting because a lot of states require you to be a teacher first before you're a counselor. Virginia does not require that. So I started as a counselor, and for me it was interesting to kind of see that side of point, and I did a lot of observing because I was in charge of child study, which is the very process to get students into special education. So I kind of got that side of a special education teacher before I became one. Like I understood what they were going through, the process to get kids into special education. So as a counselor, it was good because I was going into classrooms every week anyways to teach lessons. And I was learning kind of how that behavior management needs to come and play to be a teacher. And really for me, it kind of solidified, like, I would rather be in that classroom teaching than sitting in the classroom. But also as a counselor, it kind of helped me to mediate with students and to build that relationship, because there was behavior things that came up, and oftentimes I got assigned to doing that behavior, and I wasn't always my place to do it, but it was assigned. So it helped build the relationships and really to figure out that's really where I wanted to be instead of sitting in an office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely found out in my teaching experience that being able to do those observations, to sit and watch other people, has helped me a lot better to understand what I need to do, or to even steal ideas from good teachers.
And that helped me when I started where I'm at now, because I was more of the aide in that aspect, so I understood, like, sitting in the class, like, oh, I could do that, or that's why that's not working with this teacher right now. So, and it helped get me that environment ready, like, okay, now I can see what's going on and go from there.
I think one of the big questions that's important for teachers wherever they are here in America, but I think especially in the Middle East, is that over the course of a teaching career, probably a teacher is going to have a student in their classroom who has some special needs. But there's not a lot of advice, preparation, training that teachers are given. Like, I took one class in teacher preparation, but I don't really remember most. So if you were going to give advice to a teacher in a regular classroom on how to respond or how to interact with a student who might have some special needs, what advice would you give them?
It is taking a step back. Like, there's going to be plenty of kids, even general ed teachers have students that have disabilities that are not impacting enough to be called a special ed student. And so you know that you have to be creative and figure out the best way to work with them, and it is a trial and error kind of thing. Sitting on the child study side of this as a school counselor, I would have to say, all right, or we would have to go as a team, what can we do to kind of show that we are trying to get this student in general ed? How can we make them do their job, or not do their job, but work well? So it's trial and error. It's finding, okay, this works for, like, maybe it's giving an incentive for, okay, if you do this, then you can have this. And I know that goes against a lot of us that grew up where it's like, you have to do this because you were told to do this. And so sometimes as a teacher, stepping back and being like, just because it worked for me one way as a student doesn't mean it works for everyone. And just because I grew up with that, all right, you have to do this because you're told, that's not the way that students are right now. And finding that you can try different things with different students, and maybe it works for one student and it doesn't for the next. and also it will work for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they'll switch and they'll be like, I don't want to work for that anymore. And so a lot of that is finding someone that is either smarter than you or has more experience, and there's colleagues, peers that can help you out. And honestly, there's so much on social media that on Facebook, there's plenty of groups of people that, hey, I'm teaching this in my special ed class, what are you doing? Or I have this one student that will not do anything, can you help me out with this? And I think for students that I work with specifically that have that emotional behavior, that's a good resource, because oftentimes you're coming up with, like, I have no idea what to do. And thankfully I work in a building that has 2 therapists. So therapists are there to kind of help, hey, this behavior is the issue, what can we do, kind of there. But with kids with physical disabilities, sometimes it's more difficult to be like, well, or if they're nonverbal, they can't always tell you verbally what they need. And so with those nonverbal kids, it's trying to figure out those facial cues or the physical cues of their sitting there. They're not going to do anything. And so finding what works. And a lot of it's finding the resources that you need.
Yeah, that's a hard answer that, yeah, it is individualized, but that's the true answer.
Yes, yeah.
Not sugarcoat anything.
No, it's hard work, and it takes a lot of time to be with students in general. Special ed students, they take even more time that you kind of have to prepare and trial and error.
How long did it take you before you felt like, you know what, I have the hang of this? Or do you still not really feel like you have the hang of it?
I still don't really feel like I have the hang of this. I work with some really good coworkers that have been in the field for a long time. And not necessarily in the field of education, but field with behavior management. And so they have tricks and tools, and they have that. Some of my coworkers have that really instantaneous personality that clicks with the students. And so one of my coworkers can usually take an escalated situation and de-escalate it really quickly, which is a huge thing to have. It's a huge asset. But yeah, I'm still learning. I'm still taking classes. I'm still trial and error phase of, okay, well, here we go. So each year gets easier, but I know that I have to keep up with what's the best practice, and also just relax, and it will eventually work out too.
Yeah, that's a good point at the end, that all teaching can be stressful, and working with students with special needs can be stressful too. So what are some things that you do to prevent being really stressed out or burnout, where you're just done, you're getting out of the field?
It's a day-to-day thing frequently. So because we work in an alternative school, sometimes it can get very, very draining. Like we've had either an episode in our classroom where we had to take all of our other students out because their behavior was so explosive, or it was a very hard day. And so a lot of times we'll have to just let it go at the door. You can't bring back what you had yesterday to the school again the next day. Like whatever happened yesterday, it's you just have to let it go and not take it as personally. Laughter helps a huge amount in our classroom, and it is a bonus that I have 2 other adults in there. But the whole staff environment, we have to kind of joke around with each other, because sometimes it's just humorous as to what happens, and you're like, what in the world just happened in this classroom? We like to have a lot of jokes floating around at appropriate times, and sometimes laughing at ourselves because we just made a huge mistake, but you just kind of roll with it. Outside of school, I find that you have to have something to relax yourself. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's working in the garden, maybe it's working or going kayaking or doing something instead of just sitting and dwelling in that. Taking time to pray and meditate and to worship in whatever way each person is doing at our school. It's just taking that step back and not focusing on that stress. And 'cause if you focus on it, then it just kind of builds, and that's not good for that student. There's always a student that pushes your button to the very max every day, and if I bring that every day, then I'm just going to have animosity towards that student every day. But laughter is the big key in our building.
That's good advice.
Yes.
Last question I wanted to ask is, can you describe some of your best moments in teaching, and then after that, what are some of your worst or your hardest moments, and how did you cope with those?
Sure. Some of the best moments is when the students get that concept that you're teaching, or they remember something that you taught last week or the week before. That's always like, okay, this is what I'm here for. Or in our case specifically, we have students that are outside of their public school setting. So they're in our alternative setting, and the success of they have worked hard enough and we've put in enough time and effort that they start going back to their public school. And that's a huge thing. Like, okay, we've seen enough progress with you and you've done so well that they get rewarded by going back to their public school. That's a huge thing. Seeing them make progress and achieve the goals that they want to. Maybe not always remembering that lesson, but hey, if they're improving, that's a huge thing. Yeah, that's probably the reason to kind of keep going as a teacher and not just remember it's not about me, but what are they doing and what are they learning through it. The worst things, it varies day to day, but there's definitely the days that every lesson has gone wrong, or the internet was out at school one day, and so that's the frustrating part, when it's like the technology's not working, the printer's not working, the copier's not working, and you're just like, all right, every plan I've had is now out the window. That's a frustrating day. If there's physical altercations between students, or someone gets very, very sick, or there is a death from a student, like that's a day that you're just like, I don't know what to do with this. That's where you have to rely on coworkers a lot, and you kind of have to bounce back. If you're having a really bad day, or if they're having a bad day, sometimes you have to pick up the slack. And so kind of working as a team is really important. If you're by yourself as a teacher, sometimes you have that coworker, like a door next door, and they're like, all right, I need 5 minutes. Can you please watch these students for 5 minutes? Go take yourself a 5-minute breather and come back. Because it's easy to let it ruin your whole day. But it's best if you can kind of step back and take a moment. All right, we'll regroup and then come again. Yeah, the internet's out. Okay, find an alternative to do this for 10 minutes or for an hour, because who knows when it's going to come back on. Like the severe days where it is that behavior or that something drastic has happened, you kind of, again, deal with it in however you can kind of release your energy at the end of the day. And for me, it's been praying about it and figuring out different ways to go about it. And if it is something that's you can't just let go at the end of the day, finding someone else to talk to, a friend or coworker or therapist or whomever, and going from that. So
yeah, so it definitely sounds like the more self-aware you are as a teacher, knowing when you're getting kind of to the breaking point, and taking action at that point before you've completely lost it, flipped out, yelled at all the kids, made the mess so much worse.
And it's just yelling at students doesn't solve anything. It just builds tension. It doesn't help that relationship with the students. And I've been there. I've made that mistake. And it's just like you have lost that kind of steps that you've had with them. Sometimes it's helpful because I do have the coworkers in there. They see that I'm elevated, and they're like, "Why don't you go take a walk for a moment?" And or I'll recognize and be like, "I just need to breathe for 10 seconds," and
thought of one more last question. Because of your background in counseling, maybe this will be one that you could really offer some advice and help. So for a normal teacher, if in the course of the year something traumatic happens, either the student body as a whole, a death, a sickness, moving away suddenly, or in individual students' lives, what are some kind of tips for teachers in how to handle if they don't really have a background in counseling, or are kind of overwhelmed, like, what do I do with this?
I'll say it's helpful to have the other resources that you have in a school district. So in a public school district, you would have resources like sometimes you have a social worker, sometimes there's a psychologist in the district. And so when we had the deaths in our district, they would come in, pastors from the community would come in and provide support. Sometimes the police department might come in to provide support. And the teachers, they didn't know what to do. They were overwhelmed as well. And so it's finding that sometimes you have to process it as a staff and kind of go through. And then as a classroom staff, it would be bringing in extra support that you need, and providing the counseling that's needed, bringing in extra counselors from the community if we need them. And being there, it's not just a 1 day kind of thing. It's not just a 1 week kind of thing. It's being sensitive to some of these kids have no ability to process this, and it's going to take the entire year where you might meet with a student one-on-one, but as a classroom teacher, you're kind of managing, all right, we're going to process this now, but we can't dwell on this, unfortunately, as well, because sometimes that causes that negative cloud to kind of be in that classroom all year. So it's learning how to move past it, even recognizing that grief and going past it. So I have a student now that he's told our classroom staff 2 or 3 times, hey, this month's going to be really hard for me. My mom died, it's her birthday this month. I know it's going to be hard. And we say, okay, we appreciate that you've told us that. Yeah. We're going to keep going. And how can you honor your mom in such a way that you're not kind of dwelling in it, but also trying to strive for them to do a little bit more? How can you honor your mom? What would your mom want you to do in this situation? I don't know how it's going to work out for him. I mean, you have a student that has emotional disability, and so for him to be able to process, this is his mom's first anniversary of, or she hasn't even been gone a year, and so it's the first time her birthday's come up. Yeah. And so it's going to be a struggle. So finding that support system that everyone kind of needs.
Yeah. That has been really helpful. Thank you for all of your advice, your experience. And join us next time for more teacher interviews, sharing wisdom from around the world. Catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.